You are and will always be your most valuable asset. Welcome to the Me Inc. podcast, a series of conversations with individuals living happy, healthy, and engaged lives, while exploring the importance of emotional intelligence to thrive in this ever-changing world. My name is Nigel Franklin, a CPA, MBA, and a certified emotional intelligence coach. My mission and passion is to enable others to be that best version of themselves by understanding the importance of making investments in their physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. Before we begin today's conversation, a brief word from our sponsor, Oculus Partners, LLC. Oculus Partners, LLC works with organizations in the retirement and wealth management space that are navigating growth, change, and increasing complexity. Their focus is helping firms move beyond short-term fixes and towards clear, sustainable strategies that align purpose, people, and performance. At the center of their work is a belief that meaningful progress starts with clarity. Clarity of direction, clarity in operating models, and clarity in how leaders and teams work together. Oculus partners with organizations to design practical strategies and execution frameworks built for long-term impact. That philosophy aligns closely with the spirit of this podcast. At Me Inc. Help, we explore how clarity and intentional leadership creates lasting change, both personally and professionally. To learn more, visit oculuspartners.com. And now, let's begin today's conversation. Welcome to the Me Inc. podcast. For this discussion or for this conversation, one of the kindest people that I know. This is a complicated conversation for me, but one that I've been hoping to have. We meet so many people along the way who are living lives that are inspiring, but also who actually show up in the world with a very, very different impact, right? Who have a positive impact on how they want to be in the world, how they want to walk through the world. So the person that I am speaking with today, she is the kindest person, one of the kind of bosses that I've had over the many years. But we're going to just have a conversation today, just talk about where she is now in this journey called life, and just talk about some of the intriguing and interesting aspects of her life, as we would call it. So this is a conversation. I think it's a perspective that's very different, a perspective that is important to share. And Jamie, I'd say I'm so happy to have you as part of this conversation today. I've been looking forward to this. I think it lines up with the theme of the podcast overall. And I think that anyone who sticks with us would find something very, very, very inspirational to take away. I think the themes as we're going in, and I'm talking this week, are perspective matters, kindness matters, empathy matters. We can be in the same position, but having a very different experience. And the fact that above all else, we can actually be good human beings. Then if you're actually doing those things, we're ahead of the game. So onto that team, Jamie, welcome to the show. Happy to have you here. Let's jump in, share a little bit about who you are with the audience.
Okay, so Jamie McInnes. So I'm my late 50s. I've been in professional career all of my life. And today I actually own and operate a consulting company for financial services firms. So we consult for some of the larger asset managers, the insurers, and so forth, mostly around business strategy related to retirement. That's sort of been my general theme: institutional retirement, individual retirement at times as well. Actually, I bought my company in January 2021. So it's been a little more than 4 years, and it's been a great experience. Prior to that, I spent, 20, 25 years in industry. I started in consulting, actually. Very different type of consulting firm. In the industry part of it, I sort of joined a firm in Boston, Putnam Investments, in their retirement business. And that's sort of where I got my start in retirement, and spent 4 years there, a couple of years at an internet startup. I was really fortunate. I got an opportunity to go to Japan. I spent 4 years in Japan, which you and I chatted about before. And then back to the States. So the last 10 years of my career, actually, Nigel, is where you and I met at Prudential Financial. I had a number of roles there in their domestic businesses. And at the end was running their full service retirement business. head of that business. And then I was asked to go to Indonesia, where I had the pleasure of working with lots of great people, and one of whom was you, Nigel, when I met you
I thought
in
you would
that
just say
process.
a great person and not talk about others. I think that would have been a good way to, you know, it's interesting, Jamie. Like you leave out the theater stuff. You always leave out the theater part.
Oh,
You have a
yeah.
diverse background, right? You always leave that out. Why?
Because it's such a non sequitur, right? I mean, it doesn't fit with the rest, but yeah, I do leave it out. And it's theater and film. Early on in my life, when I was after I was sort of consulting, I wanted to go back to school and I wanted to get a master's in finance, which I did. But I needed to support myself because the consulting job was, 80 plus hours a week. There was no way I could do that. So I basically took all the money I had and started a theater company. The obvious thing to do, right?
But that is not that you don't take all the money you have and start something that you're not passionate about, right? You know what
Oh
I mean?
yeah,
So that
well, fair enough, fair enough. I've done theater since I was a little kid. So my thing is I wanted to be, an actor when I grew up. I mean, one of the schools I wanted to go to was Juilliard. I never actually applied to Juilliard for a variety of reasons. So yeah, so I did get my opportunity to start a theater company. I helped a Center for the Arts establish themselves in a new building. They're still there today, doing well. They paid off the mortgage on that building. And then I had a good friend of mine today. He'd come back from LA. He was a filmmaker. And he just asked, and he saw my name in a local paper in a photo. And says, "Look, this person looks like they're doing the same thing that I want to do, but in theater, and I want to do it in film." And we've been deep, good friends ever since. It was over 30 years ago. So he
yeah,
and his wife have seen his kids grow up. But at some point in time, I wasn't making any money at all. So I was like, maybe I need to think about doing something a little different. And so after I finished my master's in finance and got my CFA, I tried to find a job and it was challenging. Just my background was different. People couldn't read my resume and go, "Oh, I can see where you fit in this company."
I think I have the same issue in my career as well, but that's okay.
That's
Right,
just how it goes, right?
great.
So anyway, so that was the theater and the film stuff. It was a lot of fun. I still watch films with an eye towards the camera work. I always think about the acting and appreciate it in a way that with a different perspective than I think most people do when they go to see a film in theater, same thing. I love building sets and developing an environment where people could actually suspend their disbelief and become very familiar with and become very ingrained in the actual story itself, and we're taken away. And all aspects of the theater have to do that, sort of what they're listening to, what the visuals are, etc. A lot of people say, "Do you miss that?" I said, I don't know. I do that every day. I mean, what do you mean? I said, well, being a leader in a company means that you have to always be thinking about the impact you're having on your audience. What is the visual? How are they experiencing this? What are they coming away from? Are they taking away from it what you want? So public speaking in front of an audience, off the cuff or scripted, didn't really matter. Came fairly easily for me. Most of the time I didn't act in the theater work I did as a director, producer. So directing was a passion of mine, but I've acted most of my life, and maybe I just acted my way through my career as well.
I'm not
Some
going to
may
say anything.
say.
I'm going to say I'm never going to get to that. Interestingly enough, I'm going back to when we first met. We had dinner in KL together in 2016.
Yes.
It
Yes.
was you, myself, and Candace Woods. You were still newish to the international group. I don't even think I knew you
Very.
were Indonesia yet, right? That was the first time we met. And then we ended up working together in Indonesia for almost 2 years, right? Very formative, very interesting time. Also, I don't know if you know this or you remember this, but I came to Indonesia. I was there for 2 weeks, and then I came back to do the presentation or the first Meet Inc. presentation in November or December of 2017. And I remember at the time you gave me a book, and I'll hold it up. It's actually this book. And I think for the first time, I actually showed someone the fact that I geeked out about emotional intelligence. And I remember at the time thinking, I'm going to enjoy working with him. That's who you were at the time. Now
Yeah.
we've transitioned.
Okay.
We're going to get to that. But I think
Okay.
that was the formative part. I think I must say, and part of the reason why we're having this conversation today, Jamie, and all the bosses that I've had, you were one of the few who I actually think accepted me for me, who tried to understand where my perspective and my background was at the time, and guide me and steer me in the directions that you needed me to go, or you needed me to grow in. Now, I know I've joked about this with you before, and that you're the only person who didn't want me to be anybody else. Like, you wanted Nigel to show up, and that's what it was. And I think that was the transformative part of my career, because as difficult as being in Indonesia was, I got a chance to be myself, right? And I got a chance to learn a lot more about myself while I was actually there. I would actually say, though, that, and we can transition, pardon the pun, but into how our relationship was deeper, right? I remember talking to the Perspective Matter. I remember chatting with you about the fact that I was getting ready to come home, but there was no plan for me to come home. And I was talking to you about the struggles of dealing with the uncertainty that's on the other end. And then you shared with me that, again, perspective matters, because you were let go X amount of months before, and you couldn't say it to anyone, right? And then I was like, oh, here I am thinking that my stuff is bad, but you got me one up there. And then I remember,
I'm sorry that I had to do that, but
no,
it was,
but
yeah.
this was the worst one. I remember complaining to you then in 2022. I was explaining to you coming out of business school and how challenging it was to transition at the time, what was coming up. The fact that at the time, the DE&I stuff, everyone wanted to hire a Black guy, and how that diminishing that was. And I was talking about just those challenges that I was having.
Oh, no.
And, finding my voice, finding my identity. And I remember the next thought I said, as I was trying to transition away from it, I was like, here I am complaining, right? So I transitioned away, and it was like, Jamie, why doesn't Monica make you cut your hair? And that's the day that you told me that you were transitioning. And I remember sitting there like this for a while, like taking it all in, feeling that I was extremely insensitive.
And I went up to it yet again, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and I was like, I was thinking that, but then I just in the nature of our friendship, I think mid-sentence, mid you going through this, and I still feel bad about it. I was like, Jamie, you're not doing this to gain strokes when we play golf, are you? That's the thing, because that was just too far to go, right? But I remember joking about it, because at that time, I must say to you that because you were the kindest person to me, like, I was just trying to be as empathetic to you. And as we can talk about this, the transition part of it, how that has been, and I can share some of the more profound things that you've shared with me through that journey. I'm so grateful that you're willing to have the conversation with me today, not just about your career and your arc, but this last transition for you, pardon the pun again, and how you're actually showing up in the world. I think I don't have anyone other than you, my friend, who is living this life or walking down this path. And I learned so much from trying to be there for you, trying to have these conversations with you, especially in the earlier days, that I thought this is something that the world should hear, right? As many people who would listen into the show would actually hear it. So if you want, maybe we can talk a little bit about you and how you're showing up now, the transition that you've made, that idea of being not just only visible, but vocal, wherever you'd want to start, wherever you're comfortable, and we could meander from there. Could you please do me a small favor? If you're appreciating the content so far, please like and share with someone who may find this conversation beneficial. Thank you.
It might be useful to provide a little context for everybody. So first, disclaimer, I'll put a disclaimer out there. Most people probably know somebody who's trans in their life. They just they're not aware that they're trans. So I'll put that out there. Many people who are trans hide who they are because they're deathly afraid of what that will mean. Some are actually very legitimately afraid of violence, etc., completely transitioned. And they just don't want to be identified as trans. They want to be identified as he or her, depending, and just move on with life and just not have a life that is a spectacle to anybody. So I can empathize with both of those folks, those types of folks who are in the community. And then there are some who are visible, who identify openly, as trans. Media, sort of in the film sort of world, not surprising, but not so much in business. So I've always known, and this is the context for me, I've always known that I was different. My entire life. I couldn't have told you why I was different. It didn't feel like different special. It just felt different and maybe uncomfortable. Sort of my process of my moving to Indonesia had a sort of really long time frame where I really had left the domestic businesses but didn't have a lot to do. My mind slowed down, and all of a sudden it started to focus on me and the internal sort of feelings I had. Now sort of in the 2016 timeframe, but still couldn't figure it out. And then in 2017 into Indonesia, all the way through to the end of 2018. And then I came home and I still didn't know what was going on with me, why I felt the way that I felt. I mean, I look back on it, I feel like I'm pretty much an idiot for not having recognized it, but it was only in December 2019 that I finally read a book. And the book really doesn't matter, but it was a book that was more autobiographical, and it was about somebody. And I said, oh, that's exactly how I feel. Those are my experiences. And I'm like, oh, damn. So that's what this means. That was December 2019. So up until I was about 53, I really hadn't recognized that I was trans. That's not true for every trans person. It's not unusual for people in my generation, because growing up in the 70s wasn't a place where people really they were discouraged from expressing these types of things. And a lot of people suppressed it, repressed it. So that was my context, is that I just was not aware of this about myself, and became aware at a pretty late stage in life. So that's the backdrop. I had discovered this about myself, and I had to figure out what I was going to do with it. It took me a couple of years to really come around to the terms of what I needed to do for me, transitioning from a mental health perspective for me. It's just, and every step of the transition along the way, the noise in my head has come down and come down and come down. And I'm calmer, happier, more content every time that sort of advances. So it's the right thing. I'm not sure people, if someone who's trans, I think they get it. Someone who's not, you sort of have this thing in your head that's buzzing all the time about you just don't feel comfortable in your own skin. And that can be very debilitating, and shows up in depression and anxiety for people who are dealing with that. Some people figure out how to manage it. I recently found out about a friend who I've known for more than 30 years has figured out how to manage it, completely without any transition type work. But for me, it was important. So then I had to decide, how am I going to do this? I could transition when? At this point, I'm 55, 56, and I had to start sharing it with some people very close to me in my business. The woman I bought the company from is still very much involved. She is from the South. I spent time with her. She's been amazing as a person. Our friendship has blossomed over the last 4 years in a massive way. We talked a lot about whether or not coming out at work, what would it mean? I gathered information. I talked to people. And there was a lot of fear associated with that. And what I wanted to do was to think about why I'm doing this. And ahead of me even realizing that I needed to do this for me, right? I made a decision that I needed to do this to be visible, that there was this, to look at this as an opportunity as opposed to an issue. Look at it as something I could use to better the world around me. And not a lot of people get this opportunity. I mean, very rarely in life are you given this moment, right, where you could say, if I did this, it could actually have an impact on people's lives in a bigger way than I might just imagine. And I don't know that I'm doing that necessarily, but I decided to be visible as somebody who had been very senior in my industry, running one of the major businesses in our industry, now consulting to that sort of industry as I do today. And I said, I could be visible and make a difference. People could see me and start to know that this is something that others can go through as well, and that it's not debilitating and it isn't going to, it's not impacting the work I deliver, it's not impacting sort of the value that I bring, et cetera, this is what I'm going through right now. And unfortunately, it just, for a lot of people dealing with things, being trans and transitioning is just not something you can hide from the world. It's just a matter of when do you do it. And I could have waited till I retired, and I was like, I think I'd be really disappointed in myself if I waited that long. So being visible was important.
So I think the one thing that came up with me, Jamie, was that for me, at least, you were so nervous the day that you were sharing it. And I know you were sharing it with a broader group then. What were you most afraid of as you were telling your friends about this? What was that challenge for you in sharing that this is your new path, or this is the new direction that you're moving with your life? For your happiness, for your sanity, for your calmness, for your contentment with life.
So I recognize that, gender is very much a construct in our society. It's constructed differently in other societies, but gender in our society is constructed in a very binary fashion. People can become emotional about it in a big way. I think we're seeing some of that showing up in today's rhetoric. It's amazing the focus on trans people represent, such a minority of the world in terms of how the politics are playing out right now. But I think that's a testament to the fact that gender can be a very emotional topic for people. So my anxiety was about how would people hear the news about me. Most of them weren't going to have any experience. Many of them I was the first person they'd ever met that said this to them. I think it's just more about how are people going to respond, because this particular coming out can be emotionally pretty difficult. Everything from, I love you no matter what, and that this has no impact on a relationship, to, I don't believe in that. You're not around, and I can't talk to you anymore.
Have you had that?
I've had one person who said that they don't believe in it. Where I said, well, I'm sorry, you don't believe in me anymore. No, we're still friends. This is somebody I care about deeply, his kids as well, and has been a friend for 20 years. And I've just encouraged him to do, some reading on the topic, just to become familiar with what this sort of really is. Because a lot of people most people, even the ones that say, I love you, it doesn't matter. Some of them will even say, I just can't. I can't imagine. I just don't understand this at all, but that doesn't matter. It's not important for me to understand this, for me to still love and care about you, type of thing. Wow. But I believe it, but I don't understand it. So
the crazy part of it is I don't know if we need to understand it, one, right? Because it's about you, and that's the empathy part of it. I know I joke a lot, but I mean, I've given you time as much as I possibly can, because Jamie, I don't see you in any, yes, there are things that are changing, but there's so much of it that is still the same, the essence of you, the kindness that you've been, as kind as you've been to me. But how did I handle it? Because you said some things to me that was really touching, right? One of them was, you said, well, on one side, and the two, we played golf and we were having dinner. And on one side, you said, you're going from the top of the pecking order to the second lowest from the bottom of the pecking order, right? There's nothing, the way that the hierarchy of the world from that gender perspective, the
gender, race, ethnicity, the whole bit.
Right.
There's sort of
everything else.
Yeah.
Right.
Being a white man, to being, a trans white woman. puts me
Right.
sort of down.
He said
Yeah.
only thing low was a black trans woman, right? He said that
Or
that's what
a person of color. Yeah.
right.
Yes.
And so that was one. And then two, when you asked me, I was like, you asked me, so would I be comfortable out having dinner with you if you were dressed as a woman? And I was like, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
then
You said,
I
yeah, why
stopped.
would I not be?
I stopped and I said, who's paying?
Yeah.
I did tell you that you should practice walking in heels because
You did.
the relationship that we have is that if you're having a hard time, I am going to give you a hard time. But
Yes.
it wasn't right. So I know I joke about it and that's my way of handling it. But I've always been wanting to be there. But I wanted to know one, how did I show up? And then two, how
Oh,
can other people show up for someone in this place or this space in life they're going through it?
yeah. So you showed up great, Nigel. You did exactly what I needed, right? First of all, you didn't treat me any differently. But I am going to remind you about one thing you did promise me, and you are going to not like it. But you treated it with humor. You engaged in the conversation. You didn't get uncomfortable about it. The humor was, put me very much at ease. The fact that you really didn't have any uneasiness about it was great. You did tell me that if I showed up in a skirt, you would let me play for the red team. So just letting you know that that's happening.
Well, actually, to be honest, what I told you is that if you're going through the transition and you're dressed as a woman, you can play from the forward tees. But if you're not there yet, you're gonna have to play from the back there with me. That is so good. But Jamie, that I was nervous of saying the wrong thing. I was extremely nervous because I wanted to be as supportive to you as others have been, as you've always been for me. And so I was nervous of saying the wrong things. I think one of the things there's and before I get into that, maybe it is how can someone show up, right? In that empathetic way or in that supportive way if someone's going through this. Like if you had a gold standard of what good would look like in that scenario, what or maybe what are the things that you didn't experience, right? The things that were hurtful to you as you were in the process of transitioning.
How can people show up? Well, I think there's a acknowledging that something's different if somebody is showing up. So the first time I actually presented as female at work in person. A new client had hired us, had never met them before. I was helping them with a finals pitch. Several days before, I had to let the main contact know that I was trans and she, her pronouns and the whole bit. And I said, look, you're going to see me down in Florida, and I just need you to be aware of this. I just want to make sure the team is over. He was phenomenal on the call. And frankly, when I got down there, I was sitting in a room with, I was the only person from my company there. And they were all, and it says, Jamie, she's going to do this and that. And I'm sitting here going, who are they talking about? Like, I don't know.
Wait, you've been gendering yourself? Okay.
Well, I just never, it was so natural for them to adopt it. It was like, wow, that's pretty awesome. We actually were going into a pitch, and the person who led the business that we were pitching to, somebody I've known for decades in the industry, is all very senior. We're entering into a large room of about 50 people plus. This is a big meeting. And I remember walking up to him and saying, hey, how you doing? And all they could do was laugh. Now, I have to say, I could understand, his response, right? He's like, I'm not sure I'm saying what I'm saying, but, and he's not the type of person most people would think is, the most empathetic, et cetera. In terms of this, they would be surprised by how he behaved. But his colleague, who was also very, very senior at the company, they both treated me like an equal member, if not a senior member of the pitching team. When there were side meetings that needed to be held, they were like, we need Jamie in this conversation. And they just treated me wonderfully. So they showed up beautifully in the entire meeting. I couldn't have asked for more in terms of how I was engaged during that day of meetings. I think the only thing that would have been different, and, easy for me to say, right? Because the person on the other side doesn't know what to say, would have been, Jamie, you're very different. Just want you to know I'm recognizing that. Looking forward to having a conversation with you today about what we're working on. And I just hope you're doing okay. And that's it. And that's all. And that would have been the only thing that could have been added to what was really a wonderful day anyway from
Yeah.
that individual.
But I think there's a lot of fear that comes in, right? So that fear of, again, for me, saying the wrong things. And I believe at some point, I was always fearful again of misgendering you, right? And
Oh, yeah.
and that's the one thing I thought was actually really graceful how you managed that, right? You kind of slightly nudged me back whenever I would use the wrong pronouns. What is
Yeah,
that
just or she, I mean, yeah, as an alternative to he. Just yes,
right?
I would nudge
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I think a lot of people are very nervous about that, Nigel. You're not, you're not alone. In fact, some people are so nervous they don't even know what to say to you, which is challenging. They really don't know how open I'm going to be or how much I want to acknowledge anything. I'm going to talk a little bit about that visible vocal type of thing, what I'm changing this year about how I engage. I'm a person who knows that people have known me for decades in many cases, and of decades have always known me as he. I feel empathetic towards them in the fact that, that's really difficult to change. I mean, heck, I could misgender myself and instead of like, who are they talking about? I mean, so you got to give people some grace on things like that. As long as, if they're not trying to insult you, then, quietly, adjusting the thing like I did with you. I've done it in some meetings as well, and I've made it funny as opposed to, this is an issue. I don't get upset by misgendering. I do think that many trans people become very upset by being misgendered. They feel it's intentional and it's used to humiliate them. I just choose to believe that the people that I've engaged in my life are not out to humiliate me. They're just trying to figure out how to get through the day without, doing something that's really inappropriate or bad and so forth. So I think it matters to some trans people in a very big way, as it should, because there are probably people who have actually been misgendered intentionally for years as a means to put them down. I haven't had that experience, so I probably receive the misgendering differently than others. I just want people to feel comfortable talking to me. So one of the things I decided to be visible in probably around the 22 timeframe, Nigel, 3.5 years ago at this point. But I'm still recognizing that if I go into a client's office and we're in a big meeting, I know that people are having a hard time sort of focusing on what I'm saying and getting out of the conversation what they need to get out of. And there's this unspoken issue, if you will, that they don't know how to engage me. They're worried, and I would like to make people feel more at ease. So I've decided to be a little bit more vocal this year about my experience, to sort of share that with people via my LinkedIn account, simply to help people understand that talking about this is not an issue. It's not an issue for me, and I don't want it to be an issue for them. And it's not as if you need to talk about this, consume an hour of a meeting around this, but it is, it is challenging. It's a very funny conversation. I was having a video conversation one-on-one with one individual, African-American professional, asset manager, wonderful person. I've known him for years. He works at one of our client organizations, and, I thought everybody in that organization must know. But I got on the phone, and we're about 3 or 4 minutes into the conversation, and I'm watching him. I'm going, I think maybe we should stop the conversation for a moment. Just, you look a little uncomfortable. Is that true? And the response was, well, yes, I've never seen you wear those colors before.
Okay.
So I just had to laugh, and then we spent 5 minutes having a conversation about this, and then we got back to the work stuff.
Yep.
But I was realizing if I didn't stop the conversation at that moment in time, and since it was one-on-one, I could do it. And I knew him and trusted him enough to know that it would be fine. It's hard to do that in a group meeting, you know?
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more about the visible and vocal in 2025.
I need to be back out in the industry. So I'm definitely going to be more visible in industry settings. So conferences. I haven't decided exactly when I'm starting. I took 24 off, quite frankly, because I was very actively and still am transitioning. By the end of the year, I need to be back into, going to conferences, being present. The LinkedIn posts, I hope, are going to be helpful because people read them before, they see me the next time. And, I can say in a post, I could say I'm going off to a particular conference and I hope to see you there type of thing. Don't be afraid to say hello, that type of thing. That's right. What we're doing today. I have absolutely no issues coming in and talking to a group of people about my experiences and things like that to make the topic more accessible for people. So some of the things I'd be communicating, I'd love to do more if it was in help of an organization to sort of engage in this. There are a lot of people that I think would benefit in the workplace by feeling a little freer to be out and do what they need to do. But it's scary. I mean, it really is scary, honestly. It was really scary for me, but it was just something I knew that I needed to do to accomplish the things that I wanted to do from sort of a visibility point of view. I wasn't going to be able to do that unless I started. I had to start. And I did.
Okay. So you said you've been transitioning a lot of last year and you'll continue to do that this year. What's embodied in that transitioning phase of it? Because I know it's more than just showing up, right? And different. And I want to go back to the first person that you knew that you showed up to a meeting and they almost didn't know you or were expecting something different. But what's transitioning? And then, what's one of those situations where you're in with someone that you've operated with before the transition and how are you received then, right? I know you talked about, those individual meetings, the ones that, in a big room, people would behave, but are they things that you're experiencing on that one-on-one basis where it's like, it's different? So what is the transitioning process that you'll continue to go through? And then, what was one of those challenging situations or funnier situations where, it's like, yeah, you're meeting with Jamie, but not the Jamie that you're thinking you would actually meet with?
Look, I've had literally hundreds of conversations, honestly, Nigel, about this. Transitioning for me is one thing. Transitioning for everybody else is a different topic. So let me separate those out. Transitioning for me is the sort of things that, people might imagine if they've done any reading, on the topic. There's hormones, there's medical solutions in terms of how to address you being transgender and what you need to accomplish to live in your body comfortably. There's a sort of a bit of a resetting on how you engage the world. I changed sort of some of the ways that I've engaged because I've been told that was a very male way to handle that conversation. Stop mansplaining. I'm like, oh dear. I'm like, all right, fair enough. I'll fix that. I'll fix that.
Okay.
Sorry. It was a pretty interesting conversation to have with the woman that I work with so closely. And I'm like, okay, point taken.
Yeah.
So there's a physical appearance. There's like, what do I feel about being comfortable? And then actually being comfortable presenting. It's all, there needs to be a plan, and there needs to be a communication plan. There needs to be a transition plan. It needs to be done thoughtfully. Certainly for somebody at my point in my life, it needed to be done very thoughtfully. There were just too many people involved. There were hundreds to several thousand people around. I mean, who need to know because I'm going to show up and see them, which I did recently in my trip to Japan, which I hadn't been back to for a number of years. But everybody else's transition is kind of important, right? So they're transitioning on how they're thinking about you. They're transitioning in how they feel that they want to engage you, etc. I remember getting down to one of my clients' office, and he was so sweet. He was my primary contact at the client. And I came down. Normally, I would shake his hand. He wanted to give me a hug. And I was surprised, but I think he had been very deliberate around thinking through how he would engage me differently. And I considered that really, really sweet and kind. So he was going through a transition on how to deal with me. And I think that's been true for pretty much everybody that's close to me in my life, as well as those people who deal with me, but are not that close, you know?
Yeah. That's interesting that I've never thought of it as the other individuals transitioning as well, right? Like transitioning and thinking, but here you are thinking about the other side of it again. That which is I guess a sign or indication that you are in that high empathy kind of right. You rather than thinking about you're thinking about the other side, and that's good to hear because I think it then recognizes or makes the fear real on both sides of the conversation. That it's challenging. We're both maybe going through something in a less than skillful way or in a clunkier way, right? So you said living comfortably in your body. How do you
Yes.
know that's twofold, right? That's the inner working, the inner being, and then the outside part of it. How are you managing yourself through this, right? I think it's a conversation and showing up authentically, kind of that many of us would have. But this is like authenticity on steroids, right? It's going much further than you would actually say. So, how are you managing you? What's the conversations in your head as you go through this process?
So very often I have to reinforce to myself inside. This is less today than it was several years ago, honestly, Nigel. So don't imagine this is something that's still happening, but it's a lot easier today than it was. But previously, I had to reinforce to myself, I'm doing this for a reason. I'm doing this because I need to. I Imagining the worst is probably the most unlikely thing that's going to occur. Imagining the best is probably not going to occur either, but it's probably not going to be that bad. But always reinforcing inside myself was a pretty common thing that I did as I was making a trip down. The first time I got on a plane, you know, the first time that I went into a meeting, the first time that I showed up on video with jewelry, those were all things that were not easy, right? But every time I did those things, I said, this is advancing my agenda, what I am trying to do. And it wasn't just a personal agenda, it was also one that I had decided, a year or so earlier that I needed to do this because it's an opportunity. So it was just a constantly reminding myself and having an inner voice that was not the one that was taking me down the dark path, but creating one that actually was deliberately supportive of myself. And I find it odd even saying it. I can be honest with you, but that's what I did. I created an inner voice that was not the one that I normally lived with. Like, life is going to be horrible. People are going to make fun of you. It's like I created another voice that actually was supportive of myself. I don't know how that happened, but I did.
I'm going. Maybe we can actually draw on that and start selling that as a product, because it's interesting because we often talk about our inner voices and how you actually cultivate it, but you had one inner voice that served you well, and now you're transitioning to that more authentic space, but you have to work on a voice that would actually help you stay on that path, right? Which is an interesting way of saying it. One of the things that you've said to me, and you've always treated me with so much grace, right? How are you different? What are you learning, especially what are you learning about yourself, how you want to show up, especially in this current moment where, there's all of this moving away from creating inclusive environments, right? So the downward spiral of the DEI conversation, right? How is that emergent for you currently?
Well, I'll talk about the sort of the DEI sort of death spiral as we talk about it. I think about the diversity and the inclusiveness of that. I do. And the equality side, not that it shouldn't be there, it's just it's interpreted differently by different people, right? It's like, yeah, we're going to make everybody equal regardless of the merits of that person, which is, I don't think, what the intention of DEI was about. It's giving people equal opportunity to demonstrate and perform and to get a chance. it was about opportunity as opposed to making an outcome the same for everybody. And that's the criticism of it. If you want my perspective on, at least in my industry, how the end of DEI programs or the end of vocally thinking about it is going to show up, I think the rhetoric will probably be different. I don't think most companies are going to change what they actually do. Some will, but some of them were already, I mean, if you go to Hobby Lobby, you think about sort of how the proprietor there runs their business. They were already there. But the ones who've embraced diversity as part of their culture, I don't think in actual physical terms is going to, in real terms, is it going to change? And maybe there is a silver lining to it in the sense that if it isn't seen as being so performative, it just becomes part of what we do with each other as we acknowledge our differences and we step into a discussion without it being worried about, having to say the right thing, et cetera. So that might be how that evolves. I mean, over time, as we sort of go back and forth, the sort of the ebb and the flow of these topics to the point where it's like, yeah, we're different. And hey, let's just acknowledge that. And you're coming at life from a different perspective. Let's talk about how that's impacting how we work together and let's figure it out, right? Which is a very different conversation. So that's on the DEI side. I don't think most of the companies, at least that I work with, are going to do a lot of things differently. They may tone down sort of what they say because I think it could be deemed unpopular politically, but I'm not sure that's going to change their programs. What have I done, right? How have I changed? Is what you've kind of been asked. What have I been working on, right?
Yeah, I think because you one of the things before the transition, you always talked about grace, right?
Yeah.
And treating people with grace. So what's on the other side of this transition? How are you showing up in the world different from that? I think sometimes when we go through a process, when we go through something, the needs of the support that we would need, then we kind of turn that back around on the world. So what's different in how you show up now as a leader after going through this experience or are still working through this experience? Because you always made me feel seen, right? What else is coming up as you've gone through the transition?
I think I'd have to ask some people around me how to answer that. I don't feel different in terms of how I show up. And I think that's probably what some people have kind of indicated to me is that, you are still the same person. You treat people with the same degree of respect. You have the same sense of humor. You seek people's input who might sometimes be sort of marginalized in a conversation because they might be more junior. That I do those things. I've did those things before and I'll do them and I continue to do them today. So I'm not sure that I've shown up a lot different than I have in the past. I think that's one of the things I think is really challenging, I think, for people to understand. Actually, let me put it this way. For people who are going through transition, kind of understanding how much of me am I changing? And what my decision was, I'm changing the things on the outside. I'm not changing anything inside. I am who I am. I've always been this way. Some people who are going through a transition feel they have to take on a different persona to separate themselves from a past life that they would choose not to remember in some cases. But that wasn't me. It never has been me. So I'm hoping I'm showing up in the same way that you've described me showing up for you, for others, and continue to do so going forward.
Yeah. And I really appreciate hearing that you are to the core still who you are. And then the outside appearance, it is actually where the work is being done. And that is reassuring. One of the things though, as I was saying, but to prepare for our conversation today, as much as the relationship that we have.
So I haven't changed. I've changed on the outside, but not changed on the inside.
No, it's really positive. It's really positive to hear you share that the change that is happening is on the outside, and the inside is still the same. And that's how I've experienced you. One of the things, though, that I wanted to bring up is that although we've had these conversations, I still wanted to expand my understanding of the issue. My intent, my impact is still always the same, to be the same supportive friend that I've been. But I found myself, even just in preparing for our conversation today, I went out and looked at that Netflix show, Will and Harper,
Yeah.
and it was enlightening and eye-opening. How do you what advice can you give individuals to, hey, how do I increase that empathy? Is there a way of going about this experience other than having the conversation that someone can get an understanding of what it is that you're going through, or what someone in this position is going through, and how they might be able to show up as helpful for them, right? Or supportive. Is there a way of expanding that knowledge or knowing that you can recommend?
Yeah. I'm not sure if it's specifically for people who are trans. It could be for people who are different or in ability. It could be people who are different from a race who are in the minority or ethnicity, gender. Sort of an awareness that there is, if you are in that minority, which I find myself very much to be every day these days, right? Um, Understanding that that person probably is coming to the table with a background set of fears that may or may not be coming forward in how they're engaging with you, but are there, is I don't think a lot of people think about that. I mean, but okay, I'm in the white male majority, and you know, the entire group is white, and somebody of color comes into the room. It's like, okay, they are different, and I don't know where they're coming from, but I want to make that person comfortable and make sure if there are any fears there that that they are addressed. I think that that's one of the things, and I'll share a story with the woman that I bought the company from, who still very much works for me, and she and I are very close. She shared a story with me that she was in an airport recently, and because she's known me, she's been able to identify if people are trans, which were invisible to her previously. It never crossed her mind, in her words. And she was at a restaurant, sort of at a table, and she was sitting right next to somebody who was trans. But she was watching the restaurant and the servers, and there were people sort of just like not dealing with her. I mean, they were visibly uncomfortable, right?
Right.
And she recognized at that time that there was probably fear and anxiety that person was having. And she chose to turn to her and engage her in a conversation, talk about all sorts of stuff, and then put her at ease. Meaning, you don't need to be afraid of what I'm thinking, right?
Right.
I'm just going to deal with you as you are anybody else, right? I'm going to joke with you. We're going to talk about whatever and the whole bit. And I think she recognized that person, for the reasons that she's sort of seeing with me in my conversations, had fear and anxiety about being sitting there. And she recognized that and then chose to engage her, which was probably made that person's day in a way that my colleague has absolutely no idea what that meant. And it was huge.
What's interesting and what's coming up for me a lot these days is this notion that you can't expect someone to have compassion for an experience that they've never had, right? So if you've never had to step outside of yourself, you never will step outside of yourself. I really do appreciate, though, that idea of, how you often say the grace of actually making someone else feel seen. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but usually there's discomfort in growth, right? There's that green growing edge. Like if you're feeling it and you know what you're feeling, back to that self-awareness conversation that we always have. If you're feeling it, then there's something worth exploring. There's something worth leaning into, so that we're not all paralyzed by the fear of doing the wrong thing per se, right? Any themes, any conversation, anything that you would want to have or share as you're thinking about this shift that you're making? We're going to transition into a little bit more on your EQI assessment, but is there any themes or topics, is there anything that you would want to share in this same space of the transitioning, how you're seeing the world, how you want to show up in the world? Is there anything else that you would want to share on that before we?
There is, but it's probably not personal. It's probably for the viewers. You can't generalize from what I've had to say to anyone else who's trans. And it's one of those things that I probably worry about most when I talk about myself in these terms, is that people might generalize. The amount of fear that people have could be massively higher. The experience they've had historically with people, making fun of them, et cetera, it could be massively different from where I have been. So I come to the world with a set of experiences that could be dramatically different from somebody else who is also transgender. While there is some commonality around the fear and the anxiety that people feel and have felt today, their experiences are different, which therefore creates a different context for them as you're dealing with them. So my context is not the same as everybody else's, despite the fact that we have commonalities on certain things. So just don't take how I describe life as necessarily how others who are trans would describe their life.
Do you think that that's and this is just what's coming up, do you think that that's a powerful enough voice? Because you're saying, this is just me and this is my experiences. Don't extrapolate that onto the rest of the world. Whereas in a lot of the situations, it's more so that idea of see us, right?
Those are common, right? I mean,
yep.
Help people know that it's comfortable to be there, right? Do not. And then if you are really worried about, pronouns and you really want to have a conversation with a person, you say, look, I'm just a little confused. Help me. Your pronouns are, can you give me? Okay, great. Thank you. I'm moving on. Like, it's more about, you can take some of the commonalities around sort of engagement, making people visible, making people comfortable, assuming that there are fears there that, you don't know anything about as part of the context that they are arriving at. You don't have to know their experience and their context dramatically to actually establish yourself as a positive force in that person's moment, maybe not in their lives. And don't let this be an inhibitor to engage. Whereas I think a lot of people find that it's an inhibitor for them.
Okay.
So yeah, you're right. I mean, I say this because I just want to make sure that if people engage, they bring their own context to the table. It's no different for people who are trans than anybody else.
Yeah. I want to go, and I'm curious of why you put others before your experience so often, right? Even as you're trying to manage it. But that's something that we can unpack at some later point, or when we finally play. By the way, I am practicing, so just be ready.
Okay.
You had a really good round in Mexico, but I wish you could see my stuff. My putting mat is out here. I am working on it. So,
I think it's just playing with me. I just get in your head too much.
No, that's not going to happen.
I mean, I coach you on your putting, and when you sink one, I say, "You see, it's my coaching." But
right,
I just get in your head.
Thank you. It's not going to happen this time. Just putting that out there. The transition, the last part of it, and one of the things that the podcast is really interesting, but one of the ways that I thank most of the guests is by, not most, but all of the guests, is by doing an emotional intelligence assessment. The emotional intelligence assessment tool that I use is the EQI 2.0 model, and it's a data-driven way of looking at your self-awareness. This is, unlike some of the other assessment tools, it's something that changes based on where you are, and I'm sure Jamie can see a distinct difference between who I was when he met me in 2016 to who I became in 2017, who I came home as in 2019, and some of the changes that I've made since then, right? But there are cool things that are the same, but there is this idea of learning and growing, the self-awareness that you'd have on how you can actually show up in the world and have a better impact. So in our situation, Jamie had his assessment done, and I wanted to talk to you about anything that actually showed up.
Jamie had whose assessment done? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Jamie had her assessment done.
There you go. Well done.
Damn it. I did. Hey, I did it very well with this.
You did up until that moment.
Thank Thank you, Jamie. Thank you. And and I'm going to try to gather myself and go, Jamie, if you don't mind sharing, what did you learn from your assessment, your EQI 2.0 assessment?
Well, I think you indicated that I showed up. Yeah, well, you had 2 points, right? I showed up in a way that was surprising on two of them. One was on empathy, but I scored a lot lower on empathy than you were imagining.
That I did, right? I did share that, right? The empathy part of it. Oh, by the way, I should probably go. The EQI assessment has a few scales. It's your internal voice, your external voice. So what you're feeling inside, how constructively you can actually share that information and what you're feeling, how you maintain, develop interpersonal relationships, where the empathy portion of it comes in, how you problem solve, and how you manage stress, your outlook on the world. So the empathy part of it is in that interpersonal relationship scale. And Jamie's always listened to me. She's always been very supportive. So when I looked at the data, I was expecting something outsized on an empathy perspective, but it was much in a different category, still above where it was, but it wasn't as outsized as I would have expected. So just giving that
Yeah,
context.
I think I have also a very practical approach to the world as well, where we need to get things done. I'm a consultant, and we get paid to come up with answers for clients, and in business, there was a business to lead, and empathy is always important, but there are times when you need to move forward, and you're not necessarily caring for a particular person at that moment, although come back to them later or address it before with them in terms of that type of change or whatever the decisions are that need to be made. But I do have a very practical approach to accomplishing what we're set out to accomplish on a professional basis. So the problem solving aspects of things and sort of like how that combats with sort of the empathy I may show up on, I think that's probably where that's coming from. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that may very well be the reason. I'm like everybody, I'm multifaceted in the way that I think about the world, and I have to pivot between various perspectives at times, as we all do. People who can pivot in the moments that they need to probably struggle with relationships. Those who are more capable of pivoting tend to be more successful in relationships. And the more diverse your perspectives are, and the more flexible you are in terms of that diversity, probably even, the more successful. Some people really struggle with empathy, or they struggle with decisiveness, and they can't switch to that context for themselves. And therefore, in the moment with a particular situation, they may not be as successful. So probably where that came from is just I think a fair bit of empathy associated with how I engage the world, but I also have a fairly practical, we need to get things done aside as well in the problem solving and so forth. You saw that. I think you must have seen that in Indonesia, certainly.
But yeah, I think, well, that was definitely a place to see. There's a lot of problem solving and a lot of pivoting. Yes, you had a lot of practice in Indonesia. Anything else that popped out at you from the report?
Well, you indicated that I was, pretty optimistic in the report. And I would tell you that I don't think my inner voice always tells me that I'm optimistic about things. Although as I think about myself and I think through that aspect of the report and your surprise on how optimistic I was, at least I scored, given my circumstances over the last several years. Maybe think a little bit about that as well, because I do have an inner voice that is not optimistic. But over the years, if you think about sort of it's hard to describe my history. I've always had this negative inner voice telling me, because I felt so different from people around me, that voice was strong at times. And I had a very difficult social time as a child. I didn't have any friends for a period of like 4 years, where it was really tough. I had to cultivate an internal voice that was different from a very early age to get by and to get through a number of the situations. And then the other thing I think that is a test that I've taken, if you will, assessments have really identified me as somebody who has a really high tolerance for risk. And probably that combined with the experience of needing to cultivate an inner voice has probably come for this positive, has probably been the two things that have probably made me the optimistic person that I am, regardless of how challenging the circumstances are today. We will get to a place which is good. We'll eventually get to a dynamic that is good. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of focus. It's a matter of work. Sometimes it really is just only a matter of time. Time needs to pass.
Yeah.
So I think I've had a lot of practice cultivating that inner voice from a very early age. And the risk tolerance thing is also helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'll read just from the report, right? It says that, Jamie, your results show someone who is extensively optimistic and almost always see the world in a positive light. Some characteristics of your results: you approach the world with a glass half full attitude. You believe in yourself and others and rarely give up prematurely. And you inspire those you work with to overcome challenges. And I think that's the optimism part of it from a work perspective. But what I find interesting is, as you're trying to find your voice, that new voice, that different voice, as you are changing and transitioning, that you've actually kept that same outlook and that same positive attitude on things. And that's differentiated, right? So I think that's why I was like, it's a challenge to feel seen. I think it's one of the things that I struggle with, the judgments or the things that people would get wrong about me. I just had to explain to my neighbor this morning, hey, I was raised in the Caribbean. And in the 80s, it's a different place. There are things that you would think that I was telling him that I went to a bar once in college, and he just thought that was weird. But we all have a different part of it, right? But in my head, it's like, well, you can ask questions and we could still get to a different place. So that's what I found impressive about it, right? That you are still trying to be seen in a way that is different now, and you're still holding space for individuals to also do the same. So those are the things that were coming up. But you touched on a lot of it, right? The internal voice, problem solving, optimism. And I appreciate, again, the openness to, one, take the assessment, but two, to also just share some of the things that you're noting, right? So as we're wrapping up, a couple of things. Rapid fire thing.
Okay.
Nothing on golf. One thing you can't live without in these days. One thing you go through every day with these days.
Can't live without glasses anymore, Nigel. I'm getting old. I'm sorry. It's just like I can't read anymore unless I have glasses on. It's really depressing.
Bifocal contacts.
I got to look into these things, but yes, if I have time.
It's a game changer. Okay, so your glasses. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
One quote, phrase, something that keeps you inspired. Saying, quote.
Saying or a quote. I'm not a big follower, generally speaking, and kind of think about, well, Winston Churchill said once, it's just not me, the type of person that I am. If I think about sort of some of the inner voice things that I repeat to myself, nothing is as bad as it may seem. You just
Nothing
have to have, as it may seem to you right now.
Okay.
Sometimes
so
that is
bad as anything. Okay. Yeah. And then if there's one thing you want the guests to remember from this episode or this conversation today, other than that I'm an amazing person and golfer, what is that one thing?
So to be interviewed and talk about that, just remember that as you go out into the world, we, trans people, are everywhere. I hope that people are a little bit more aware, like my colleague who is now much more aware of people are trans. You show some kindness towards those people because they are struggling. Oftentimes they're struggling. Not always, but often they are.
Jamie, thank you so very much. If someone wanted to reach out to you, where could they find you?
LinkedIn is, there's more coming there. I mean, our company website just has my bio on it, but I mean, LinkedIn is probably the place for people. If they want to talk to me, message me, reach out, connect with a little message that says, hey, I saw you on the podcast, would love to connect type of thing, then I'll know where it's coming from. yeah, that's probably the easiest way for people who are. And Jamie McInnes, I don't know if you're going to put anything up, but spelling
It'll
my
be.
name, spelling my name
Right.
correctly, it's always a good thing because that doesn't happen often.
Yeah.
McInnes,
Okay.
you'd think it'd be easy, but
I want to say personally, Jamie, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. You
appreciate it.
inspired me to continue to be authentic and show up as myself. Again, remind me to that my perspective matters and how I see the world. And that idea of individuals maybe standing in the same place but having a very different experience.
Yeah.
And back to that same emotional intelligence aspect of things, that default of being a good human being, I do see you as an amazing human being. I'm so happy through this transition that you've been the same. You've received me the same way, treated me the same way, and I hope that I will continue to do the same. So thank you for sharing today. I know this is new for you as well, but showing up in this space,
Yeah.
and thank you for trusting me to have this conversation.
I
So
really appreciate you, and I really appreciate the fact that you wanted to do this. So thank you.
absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate you listening to this episode. If you find value in what you've heard today, please like and share, and don't hesitate reaching out to me if there's any way that I can be of service. Nigel at meinkhelp.com or Nigel Franklin Way on Instagram. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your mental energy. Thank you for listening. And until we meet again in this space, take good care of you.